and shared responsibility and providing opportunity for everyone. So public servant does not have a negative connotation to it. I'm sorry?
It's not a pejorative.
Right. Yep.
One of the things that never became part of this discussion, but one thing which I know rather intimately about the function of teacher associations within the educational system. The teacher associations lead and have led the evolution of the quality of education.
Perfect.
For years.
Perfect.
And I never heard anybody talking about that in this conversation.
I have a good story about that.
I met with a business leader for months, and his thought, his understanding of union, which is why I say teachers association, is that a union does one thing. It looks out for its self-interest. Whereas, in my experience, educational unions, quote unquote, educational associations look out for the future of the children of our community.
Yes.
And it was never part of this dialogue.
No, and it should have been. And there, believe me, there were people, myself included, that were saying that early on. And I did a all-day session at WEAC a couple weeks ago, and one of the messages that we came out of with that was this idea, because they wanted to focus on community schools, that kind of thing. One of the messages we came out with was, look, you know, your community prospers when your schools prosper and provide, and as a teachers association, you know, we provide the teachers who, I don't remember exactly what the phrasing was, but something like, we provide the teachers that are, you know, skilled and responsible and care for students and quality teachers. I mean, it's that kind of thing. So it took the idea of community and it made the teachers union a critical part of the community. That your community prospers when your schools prosper, and the teachers union or the teachers association helps provide the teachers that make that possible. Instead of the other way around, where it's the unions traditionally have said that, you know, we protect teachers. There's a difference between providing something critical for the community's future and we protect teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's brilliant.
And they also, I mean, if you want to frame this in terms of a significant religion in this society, is that the Republican strategy has been to invoke and promote the practice of one that violates one of the 10 commandments, and that is, thou shalt not covet.
Oh yeah.
Covetousness is at the base of comparing union people to other workers.
Right.
And workers' rights has become code for union self-interest.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But thou shalt not covet is something that should resonate with the community.
Right, which is why they say special interests. And why, right. So here's some ideas for framing labor unions. First of all, don't say collective bargaining, because that evokes a conservative frame. Because if you have to do something as a collective, you're not self-reliant, and that's a bad thing. And when you think of union thugs, that bargaining is done under duress, unfairly. You know, a good way to say it is to say that to negotiate for a fair portion of profits. And profits are not inherently evil. We have to stop getting, look, I've heard people that don't want to vote for Martha Lanning just because she's a businesswoman. No, I'm serious. I know a lot of really progressive business people. Are we going to get to the point where we have a litmus test where if you are in business, you're bad? profit is not inherently bad. Profit is a result of capitalism. There's nothing wrong with capitalism in a system that has progressive regulation, right? Safety nets, level playing fields. There's nothing wrong with that, as Elizabeth Warren said, right? We have to get past this idea that profit is a terrible thing and start framing it as something that can be achieved responsibly.
Well, the sports, the NBA and the NFL are the first ones who started to say that. That the players were just negotiating for a fair portion of the profit.
Yeah,
So for teachers, what are you going to say? They don't have
we're going to get to that. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
No, don't you invoke the economic model worldview of the universe by using profit?
No, because there's a progressive economics and there's conservative there's different worldviews of the economic system. Look at Thomas Piketty's book, Capitalism in the 21st Century. He started evoking the progressive idea of economics by talking about wealth and equality over generations. Yeah, he is French. Thomas, Thomas, Pikkety. Yeah, Capitalism in the 21st Century.
Right.
Brilliant book. Great read. Great read. All right. Unions are democratic. They represent the freedom of people to organize in a democracy.
So what's wrong with collective self-interest if it generates a collective vote of 51%, which expresses a collective self-interest?
Something to vote
Collective self-interest seems to me to be an oxymoron.
Yeah, okay. You answered my question, thanks.
Okay. This goes back to FDR, right? The role of government, the public, has a moral role. That is to protect and empower everyone. Okay? The moral role of corporations is the pursuit of profit, without regard for anything else.
What got me was the innovation that came out of the Harvard Business School that corporations should be concerned about the investors.
Oh, it's still same thing. So this is one of the reasons conservatives hate unions. It is a form of the public, a form of government that protects and empowers everyone. And not just, see, this is important, not just union members. Right?
Yeah.
Everything a labor union does protects and empowers everyone in the community, because the things that the union works for, the things that the union provides, translate to the community in general. It increases economic prosperity, it provides greater opportunity, it provides training, provides safety measures, protect and empower. And it also, and that can be said, empowering people to be free from want and fear through living wages, adequate benefits, and humane labor practices. That is the community at large, not just labor members. That's really important. And unions should start talking about this all the time. We do this for your community. And here's how. All right. In terms of private sector unions, corporations will not pay your worth without a union. Okay, your labor will have a higher value, and this is getting along the progressive model of economics. Your labor will have a higher value when you're in a union. George Lakoff likes to say that if you aren't in a union, functionally you're a serf, because you are working at the behest of that corporation. Thus, this term, workers are profit creators. Okay, so let's stop talking about job creation and let's talk about profit creation. Here, profit is moral because the business hires workers to create profit for that business. And in turn, the business owner has a moral responsibility to provide a fair living wage share of those profits because the workers created those profits. It's a way of getting to the systemic nature of the relationship of economics, management, labor, without evoking this ridiculous idea of a job creator.
What happened to corporate responsibility? Why did that go by the wayside? 'Cause when I went to business school, that was a big,
Yeah,
it was on the outs, but
there are people like John Mackey who owns Whole Foods that they talk about corporate stewardship, but that it's very surface. Yeah, it's more appearances than practice. Here's where, so public sector unions. All public workers are public servants. And the reason that that's effective is because you're communicating this to a broad population that needs to understand that what they have in the private sector, their homes, their property, a lot of their freedoms depend on those public servants. Right? Try to do things, build a house, buy a house, sell a car, buy a car. Try to do those without public servants. It's not going to happen.
You can't build a house without code regulations.
Permits,
Permits.
licensing. Try to start a corporation without public servants. You need to incorporate, you need a legal system, all those things. People need to understand that those public servants are important. And then my point with the Act 10 is if that had been established, then if they had called a strike, people would have really gotten it. But they couldn't strike because that frame wasn't established. So, right, so this is the bottom line. Private enterprise and prosperity are not possible without the public, servants, employees, workers. Right? Even private sector unions are representatively public forms of government because they protect and empower not only their members but everyone in the community. They provide standards, they provide training, they increase the economic viability of a community. Very important. Okay. Everybody know what SB 44 is? I didn't want to say right to work. Wage theft. Right to work legislation. We'll call it what they called it. They called it right to work. Right to work is a metaphor. Okay? So this was the commercial that ran statewide. Americans for Prosperity did this. So you are really going to hear conservative values in this one.
Wisconsin's always been a place of big ideas. Our next one, right to work. Right to work means more freedom. It
Okay,
means more
hold on.
choices for Wisconsin's workers.
Sorry, they led with the metaphor right away. Light bulb, it's a big idea. It's not an issue. It's a metaphor, right to work. There's no literal thing as right to work. Okay, I got to back up because you missed a good line there. Sorry. A little bad on the clicker.
Wisconsin's workers. Because deciding to join the union means more choices for Wisconsin.
Okay, here we go.
Right to work means more freedom. It means more choices for Wisconsin's workers. Because deciding to join the union should be your choice, not theirs. And deciding not to join shouldn't cost you your job. Right to work means more jobs for Wisconsin. It means making Wisconsin a better place for new businesses. So tell your legislator, right to work is right for Wisconsin.
So now that you've heard that, how effective do you think right to work for less, as the unions were saying, how effective do you think that would have been?
not at all. Obviously, it wasn't effective.
Well, no, and even if they had gotten a 2-year head start, it wouldn't have mattered because they're just evoking right to work. Oop, I keep forgetting to hit the clicker. You heard a lot. So what were the conservative values in there? You heard a lot of them.
Freedom.
More freedom, choice, individual. Everything is individual. Plus, don't forget direct causation, right? More unions, less jobs, because they're only out for what? Their own. I forget your name in the back, sitting next. You said, John, about how unions are only out for themselves, right? The direct causation. Unions are only out for themselves, so if there's more stronger unions, less jobs, worse economy. Direct causation.
But I'm not sure that they won the battle with right to work. I think most people are still against it.
No. It polls really high.
Did they?
Absolutely.
Is
Yeah.
there any way to turn right to work?
Yes.
We want a constitutional amendment that we all have the right to work.
Well, I mean, it would have to be repealed, but some legislators picked up on it, not enough, but I was saying call it a wage theft bill. And we'll get to why that's so. First of all, mentioned this earlier. So a private corporation, this is about the relationship between private corporations and workers. A private corporation, it's a form of government with one pursuit, profit. Okay, that's important. Why? As I said, the corporation hires workers to create profit. See, what I'm doing here is I'm laying out the systemic nature of the relationship, which is actually how they should have talked about this legislation, how progressives should and can still. So, all the workers of Wisconsin, whether you flip burgers or are a caddy at a golf course or are a welder for $20 an hour well, that's public sector, but let's say you teach physics for a for-profit university. Okay, you are a profit creator, everyone. And that's important because it contributes to the larger economy, which then people understand that if your share of profit is increased, it increases it for everyone. Greater prosperity for all. A union is a democratic representation of its workers. I don't know why they couldn't say, look, if you care about democracy, you should care about a union.
Just the democratic part, though, moves people a little bit? Do they think it's a more of a partisan?
I don't know. I think when you talk about in terms of democratic as in voting and representation, yeah. The other thing they should have said is, look, as workers, we have a moral right to get a living wage portion of that profit. I mean, if we help create it and we don't get enough to live on, that's immoral. That's immoral. You're stealing from us.
The perception is, and certainly in my community it is, based on anecdotal evidence and talking to your friends next door, that union workers are not fighting for a living wage. People who are non-unionized are fighting for a living wage.
Yes.
Receiving it.
Yep.
Union workers are the rich blue-collar workers in our community.
Yep.
Relatively speaking.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
and that's probably, and that's statistically true.
Mm-hmm.
The average wage of a union member working in one of the mills here makes more than the average earnings or wages of a press operator in a non-unionized printing shop.
Yeah.
No matter how big it is.
That's why they're
Which is
So it's
separated
not,
from the
unions are
consequences.
not about living wage portion in reality. And I just think that there's an error in that statement because it says a living wage portion.
No, it says workers have a moral, not
Say union workers.
all workers.
Right, I understand, but the perception is that unions are a sort of a worker elite that receives very high wages, and if I'm not in a
Proportion
union
to their
shop, I
ability.
don't.
And what you're communicating is effectively the fault of the unions for the way they have portrayed themselves, for the way they currently frame themselves.
Right.
This is something that they have to do better along with.
They're not communicating the impact of what they do.
Correct.
On the general wage levels within the non-unionized population.
I agree.
At all.
And this has to be part of their how they newly reframed themselves, because, as I said, what they do protects and empowers all the profit creators, which is all the workers, because as they provide protections and better wages, they will elevate everybody in the community. That needs to be part of the process. They need to make sure that they start communicating that what they do is ensure every worker receives a living wage portion of profit, because you have created that.
What I hear Bob you saying is that not a lot of non-union workers, and I'm very close to them. I work at Wapaka Foundry as a non-union foundry, and they're paid pretty well, but we're the only shop in town, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that almost to an awful lot of them, there's a disconnect. They don't like unions.
Right.
Union workers, yeah, they make too much money. They're too lazy.
Yes.
They don't work hard enough. There's a disconnect, which unions need to work on, and progressives in general need to work on, to say, come on, don't complain that you're not making enough, or that they've got it easier than you.
Yep.
Why? Because they're in a union. Maybe if you work to unionize your shop, maybe
you remember at the beginning when I said that
look more faithful.
progressive authority comes from leading by example and living what you say? Unions need to live that. I will be one of the first people to say to a union president, you need to live these values. You need to provide solid evidence that your organization embodies these values in your community. Because they don't. It's just like, to take it to another example, like police, right? There are a lot of good cops out there, but there are some really bad ones that do really bad things. There are a lot of good unions out there, but there are some really bad ones, like in Chicago, that do really bad things. And conservatives use this, there's a cognitive phenomenon, it's called salient exemplar. Anybody know what salient exemplar is? Ronald Reagan used it with welfare queen, where you find one example of an extreme case and people cognitively understand it as being the norm.
I just want to say, I think that, the Baltimore issue that
Oh, yeah.
on NPR, I've heard it twice now, that after they go in there now, saying that they're indicting these several policemen, they always say, they finish it off by saying, the union says that no one did anything wrong. And it just kills me.
Yes.
It's like, well, how the hell did that happen then if nobody did anything wrong?
So the National Education Association did a national poll of public school parents. These are parents with kids in public school. Something ridiculous like 60% public school parents thought that unions protected bad teachers. And here's what's interesting. One of the things why this is so important, why this is more than just words, is because what you unconsciously understand affects your physical behavior. It's the idea that if you start communicating it and talking about it and going to union people and saying, well, you should be talking about this, you should be doing this, it can affect physical behavior. That's why, during the protest, people carrying Union Thug signs, I just wanted to smash my head into the wall. So anyway.
Well, the perception that unions protect poor workers is out there, and it does happen.
Sure, it's that salient exemplar effect.
And
it's easy to...
Unions don't stand up and say, we're here to make sure the most effective workers are here, helping all of us generate benefits for all of us.
It's the same message that the teachers union should have, right? We provide the caring, responsible, well-trained teachers for your kids who are the future of your community. And when your public schools are doing well, your whole community is going to do well. And we're going to provide a critical part of that. That should be every union's message across, right? Police union, why didn't they say, you know what? We're going to start doing new training. We're going to work with the city to, I mean, you take an opportunity like that and it's just gone. I agree.
Do unions provide tenure through membership from day one, or is there a?
No, it depends, but I think there's processes.
Every contract.
It's different. Oh,
Now, this goes beyond just public employee unions. This idea that unions are bad, it kind of permeates all unions.
right.
That anybody or any product that might be made by a union is suspect or should be suspect.
Mm-hmm.
So would a counter for one of these knuckleheads, like Walker or
Yeah.
something, says that unions are not trusted and their products can't be trusted, can we ask him why he drives in a union-made SUV, flies around in a union-made airplane? If he does not trust them, why is he not purchasing non-union-made vehicles? Because they do make them in China.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of European models that are not union.
It would be better to provide examples. For example, the big GM recalls
Right.
with all the faulty parts, right?
The ignition keys.
Thank you. Right,
And the airbags.
right, right. It would be more effective for the union to come out and say things like, you know, if we had, you know, a greater ability to, you know, for training and quality control purposes like we used to, you know, we would have caught these things before people died. We could have, you know, intervened, you know, if there was a level playing field for our workers to come out and catch this early, people wouldn't have died. I mean, provide a positive example.
Right, my
of,
point would be, instead of letting them frame it just to public service unions,
oh yeah,
take that step and expand it to all unions and all products.
yep,
So they're saying because the public service employees are lazy, the teachers are lazy, so are the people that build our cars,
mm-hmm,
and our airliners,
mm-hmm,
and the trains, and the equipment that builds our roads.
mm-hmm. It's this idea that, you know, unions, public or private sector, have the same moral mission as government. That's to protect and empower everyone. And again, it goes beyond their members, and that needs to happen. We can agree on that. So that's part of the protection and empowering mission against the corporate greed of profit at any cost. See, that's where you supply the contrast.
Are they going to have to abandon unions?
No.
I mean, the word union.
No.
Are they going to have to rebrand themselves?
They need to rebrand themselves, but I don't think they need to abandon unions.
The word union.
No, I don't
Just
think
the
so.
Word, I mean.
No, I don't think
Because
so.
if they started to call themselves cooperatives or profit-sharing groups,
Again, it's all understood in context. I mean, right now, the dominant context of union is this negative connotation.
Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, they need to reframe themselves. I mean, these are just some kind of messages that, like, some legislators use these. The second one, any legislation which takes away the right of the profit creators to receive a living wage opens the door to corporate greed and servitude and contributes to wage theft. I mean, it's making the connection between, you know, the cause being greed and the effect of wage theft from the people that created the profit. So, okay. So here's where, you know, so we talk about this idea of public versus private, and how the conservatives, you know, what Grover Norquist said was that, you know, conservatives, they want to shrink government down to the size of a baby so they can drown it in a bathtub, of wanting to destroy the public because it's immoral. One of the things
that... Why would you want to drown a baby in a bathtub in the first place?
Well, remember what Goldwater said. extremism in the case,
Right, we want to
right? So,
back them up.
but the idea is, how do they do that? Economically, is by cutting what? Spending, right? That they have this crazy metaphor out there that people really buy into, that the government's budget is like a family budget, right? That should be, and people, if you're disciplined, you don't spend beyond your means, right? I want you to listen to how many times you hear Ron Johnson say cut spending in this short amount of time.
You need a bucket.
Yeah. But it's going to be, when you hear it, it's hilarious.
Freshman Senator Ron Johnson has only been in office 4 months. He's already making a big impact, taking on the budget and the deficit, and being talked about as a candidate for vice president. Senator Johnson is here with us now, sir. Thank you very much. Big issue coming up very soon, within days, I guess, the debt ceiling. The vote is just days away. What will you do when asked to raise the debt?
Okay, metaphor. Debt ceiling. If you hit the ceiling, you can't go any higher. Remember a fiscal cliff? Right? And then they tried to like reframe it and call it like the fiscal speed bump, which was really weak. But anyway, okay.
And why?
Well, hello, Eric. Thanks for having me on. I think the vote on the debt ceiling is a very important moment in time where we can really expose who's serious about actually controlling spending and who isn't.
Controlling, so if you are not talking about controlling spending, then you're not serious. Exactly.
So I think we need to utilize that moment as of maximum leverage to extract the strongest possible spending controls. Because in the end, that's our problem. We have this spending problem. And really, the way, as a manufacturer, I always look to the root cause of the problem. And to me, the root cause of our problems right now is the size, the scope, and includes regulation and the cost of government. And I think what we first need to do is establish a very hard spending cap. And that's what we need to attach to that.
Right, sir, but
Okay, so he's been talking for 1 minute and 8 seconds, and he's already said some context of spending cuts 5 times. And he also evoked the idea that the problem that we have is the size and scope of regulation and government.
again, it's going to, before you're able to cut spending, before it's able to do another budget rehash, you're going to have this debt ceiling issue fall on your lap. What do you say? Do you let the U.S. economy, let the American country, do we exceed the debt limit and really risk a default?
Well, first of all,
So he just asked him the same question.
Right.
Yeah. And he asked it backwards. Do we risk default if we raise the debt ceiling? It's the other way around.
I mean,
Doesn't
he
have to
screwed up.
Yeah, but he still, he asked this, he reinforced the same question.
Are those TV interviews pre-scripted?
No, they're not, but there's an interesting,
the federal government is going to continue to receive revenue, and it can certainly service the debt. And it can pay for an awful lot of government during that time period as well. But no, we simply have to recognize the greatest threat to this nation, as Joint Chief of Staff Admiral Mullen said, is our out-of-control spending, the level of debt. And we have to recognize that is the most serious threat facing this nation.
He just said the debt is manageable. We have no problem paying off the debt.
but then he said,
Oh, the debt's going to kill us.
spending is the biggest threat.
Right.
All right. So there's this, so here's what's interesting about the whole framing thing. So if, let's say you're on a panel discussion on Fox, and you're the progressive, and let's say Ron Johnson is on there, and this guy turns to you and says, are you for or against spending cuts? But here's what's interesting. If you answer the question in his frame, even if you negate it by saying, we don't have a spending problem, you've just reinforced his frame. So these guys are trained to ask questions and maintain the frame of the debate at all times.
That's why they seem like no minds.
So clearly, I mean, the conservative frame, the values there are, government is immoral. The public is immoral. It takes away from the job creators moral
Right,
purpose,
money.
right, which
So
is profit.
What is he doing, holding an elected position if he's in an immoral job?
He's gonna shut it down for business.
Because, right, they believe that their moral mission is to expand freedom for private sector to pursue more profit.
Decapitate the beast from within.
Exactly. Yep.
Scott, how will the revelation that Mr. Walker has a significant credit card debt, therefore being irresponsible,
Yeah,
is
that,
that a concern to him,
it-
or how can we?
As much as half the staff being in prison.
it could be.
I was just.
I mean, it could be if it's framed, look, if it's framed the right way by his opponents, then it could be, yes. Now, in the conservative primary, it could be a huge problem. If they bring it up in terms of that he's not disciplined, that he's free spending, that he doesn't live within his means. But,
We should look for that.
right,
sort of
that, you should look for that kind of thing. As far as a progressive goes, I mean, the clear way to undermine him is the whole idea of the betrayal of trust. Okay, so